Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the GGB Supplier Showcase. As always, I am your host, Jess Marquez, and I am pleased again to be joined today by a familiar face, a friend of the program, John Connelly, CEO of Interblock Gaming. John, how are you doing today, sir?
Good, thank you.
I was thinking this morning as I was getting ready that this is just such a great time of year, right? Pretty much no matter what you're involved in or what you're doing, it's just such a good time because it feels like there's something for everyone, right? I mean, it's sports are right around the corner for everyone. Big political season, obviously, for the political junkies out there, and for the gamers of us, it's pretty much the heart of show season. I mean, you said before we got on, we're about 6 weeks about away from G2E. We got ice around the corner as well, so. Just a busy time of year. I want to get right into it. It's been a little bit since talked to you, so I kind of want to do a bit of everything. I want to talk about some of the past stuff, some of the present stuff, and then at the end we'll wrap it up with some future stuff, if that's all right with you.
That's great.
All right. So it's funny. I have this might be a little bit of a weird way to start, but I've got private equity on the brain. I just did a big story earlier this week about some of the recent private equity deals in the industry. I think it's kind of an interesting trend that we see. You guys are actually about 2 years removed from your acquisition from Oak Tree Capital. I'm curious, how has that kind of gone? And in your sense, having been with the company for so long, how do you think the last 2 years have kind of impacted the trajectory of the company?
Yeah, I mean, working with private equity, I have nothing but positive things to say. Great opportunity to work with Oak Tree Capital. I have several other investments with them outside of just Interblock. They're very aggressive and proactive in the gaming sector right now. Acquisitions from route businesses to casinos to companies like Interblock, and I think there's more on the horizon. So private equity, I think, is great for gaming. Their capital infusion, their ability to have more of a, publicly traded companies oftentimes are quarter to quarter, and you're not always able to make the decisions you would like to make just because of that quarterly public pressures that are placed on you. Whereas with private equity, it's a little bit more long-term vision. Gives you a little bit more flexibility. Obviously, the capital you need to do M&A and acquisitions and sustain yourself. So for me, private equity is definitely the right, I would say, partner for Interblock as to where we are today and where we want to go.
Sure. And, I think you highlighted several things that I think a lot of the people that I talked to for that story also mentioned as well. And I think this kind of ties into my next question, but I think a lot of the companies that you're seeing now, as they try to expand into digital, especially, they're having a hard time facing that shareholder pressure and kind of trying to get things right, basically on the first go. So speaking of digital expansion, another thing that I've been really interested about that I haven't been able to talk to you about yet is your guys' deal with Black Cow Technology. That was, I believe, back in June, if I'm not mistaken. And it's kind of your first foray into the iGaming space. And I'm just curious, how is that partnership progressing, and kind of longer term, like what are your kind of hopes and expectations for that partnership?
Yeah, I mean, Interblock, it was probably one of the, I would say, last remaining major suppliers, at least from a traditional gaming perspective, casino space perspective, licensed, that had not entered into the online space. And that was an intentional decision by myself and others where we were just in such a hyper growth mode and have been for about 10 years at Interblock. I didn't feel as though the company could really sustain that kind of growth rate in our core business and then expand it into the online space. And it was also something that I really wanted to watch and see how it entered the North American market. And I think we're now with New Jersey and Michigan and a few other smaller markets, Canada, we're getting a better feel as to the sustainability and the business model and the potential. So with that said, we're going to be entering in probably by the end of this year, the latest Q1 2025 in two different areas. One is the remote gaming server, which is, a lot of companies and there's a lot of history out of the Isle of Man and Malta and other jurisdictions with displaying your content on a remote gaming server, which is the Black Cow approach, and why we acquired a version of that platform to allow us to, I would say, more quickly and easily deploy our content into that vertical. The second area we're looking at entering into through another partnership with a company called A Wager, which is a company also owned by Oaktree Capital, is for live streaming. And live streaming is something that we're very passionate about. We think in many ways is going to supersede the remote gaming server distribution method, which is more graphical in nature, obviously very successful, generates billions of dollars of revenue a year globally. But I think the future, as you can tell from companies such as Evolution Gaming and some of the other, live streaming technology stacks that are being offered in distribution methods, it's something we're very much invested in and believe strongly in for the future as well.
Sure. And one other question that kind of comes to mind from that for me is like, how does that, as you guys kind of look to migrate your content or kind of go into the live streaming aspect of it, how does that change things from like an R&D perspective? Because I would have to imagine that, for someone like you guys who um, have grown a market share that's so dominant in this one particular space, especially on like the land-based side with ETGs. I mean, I would imagine that you would have to kind of change that process a little bit, or kind of maybe a little bit more trial and error maybe than you might be used to. I mean, how does that side of things work from a development perspective?
Or, being last to market is not necessarily where you want to be, or being, behind others. In this particular case, though, I think by Interblock entering the online space long after several other entities or content suppliers in gaming, we have a huge library of content, proven content that's very successful, brand recognition, play actions. And for the past several years, we've been preparing for this. So we've been patenting, not only from a traditional casino perspective, but from an online perspective, a lot of our innovation, play actions, features, functionality for both the online space and the traditional casino floor. So we're somewhat in a fortunate position where our content and our library is ready for the online space. And that integration, especially from an RGS perspective, is not very complicated these days versus 10 years ago. Live streaming is a different discussion. I would say that there's more complexity in distributing your content and preparing your content for a live streaming environment. But we're also, luckily, because of the relationship with a wager and having the same ownership structure, we've been very fortunate in being in a position to take Interblock content and quickly API and adapt it into that technology as well. So, again, I think we're blessed from the standpoint, time to market complexities are relatively simple, versus if you were to try to start from scratch 10 years ago.
Definitely. And it's something that I'll be curious to see as it progresses for sure. I mean, I think your guys' kind of mantra of luxury gaming products, I mean, definitely reigns true. And I'll be curious to see how that kind of translates to the online side of things. I think it's a natural progression. Um, so as we've kind of touched on a little bit before, we are now into the heart of G2E season. One thing that I love about you guys, and I've told you this before about when I go to shows, is to see your guys' gigantic booth. It's always kind of one of the more interesting, and I mean that in a good way, features of the show. It's like a nightclub almost in there usually, and it's just really interesting. Um, so, kind of, what's your guys' overall plan for the show? By the way, booth number 1239 for those interested. So, what's your kind of plan for the show? And I guess what would you want attendees to take away from it?
Yeah, this year, more than any other year in the past 10 years, Interblock, I think, really put the employees have put a lot of effort into maintaining that reputation of innovation. I think we're fairly well known at G2 each year of innovation and doing something new, new and innovative for the industry. So this year, more than any other year, we're going to have not only new products, but we're going to be entering into somewhere between 5 to 6 categories, new categories of gaming as Interblock. So that's incredibly exciting. Everything from HHR to Class 2, as we just talked about the online space. But we also have a little surprise. It's not so little for the industry, but we're very much focused on, we're believing in that casino floors more and more we're seeing environments evolve. And as you create environments on casino floors, whether it be our stadiums or packaging a grouping of electronic table games in a certain area, the overall handle and occupancy goes up dramatically. It's almost as though players are looking for, where's my area of the floor that's for me. And I think, when you look back decades now, there was, for all intents and purposes, maybe, 3, 4, 5. You had your live pits, you had your slot areas, you had your high limit room, maybe you had a poker section. But what we're finding with electronic table games is that as we create environments for players, it's resonating. And so we're this year going to continue to build upon that learning curve that we've experienced and bring a new category to a casino floor. So, up to now, I think most people would agree you have slots, tables, and electronic table games, ETGs, are the primary three drivers on a casino floor today. We're going to try to add a fourth category. We're going to try to create a fourth area of the floor that is not exactly a live table game or a slot or an electronic table game as we envision it, or the typical definition. We're going to try to create a section of the floor that's for a new demographic, a new player base. And I'm very excited about that. I don't want to get into too much detail now. I'll let it be the surprise 6 weeks from now. But if we're successful, there'll be a fourth category on casino floors. I think back 10 years ago, when I joined Interblock in 2015, a lot of people didn't even know at that time, and I've said this in other interviews, what an ETG was. In many cases, they didn't know who Interblock was. So we are going to embark this year on trying to create a new area of the floor that most people will not have really heard of or envisioned. And if successful, 5 years from now, maybe we'll have this new category that we now talk about that's standard and typical in the industry. So stay tuned. We'll let you know here shortly how it goes.
Wow, wow, okay. So that was a lot there. So I think the first reaction I have is, obviously without getting into any sort of detail, but how this fourth category that you mentioned, like, I think my question is like, how long has this kind of idea been circulating among you guys, or how long has this kind of taken to get to this point in terms of development? Are you able to share that?
Yeah, sure. No, we've been thinking about it for several years. And to come out at a show and have several products to fill an area of a floor and to create a new category takes time. We've utilized several of our development centers now. And what's allowed us to do this now versus maybe 5 years ago is simply the scale of the company. When, 2015, we had around 30, give or take, people in R&D, and today we have over 260 through M&A and acquisitions, and we continue to acquire companies we're going to be announcing shortly as well. That's another item at the show that will surprise people with. We obviously bought Aruze, but we've bought another company here recently that we'll be introducing at G2E this year, which, again, that scale and that increased R&D infrastructure has enabled us to work on multiple strategic initiatives in parallel. And so this new category has been in the works now for a couple years. It's at its infancy, meaning we just have the first products that will come out at G2E. But there is a product roadmap behind this that will go on for several more years to continue to expand and support this area of the floor. As we did, we're kind of, in many ways, trying to replicate best practices and what success we've had and what we've learned over the past 10 years in evolving what we now consider this ETG category of a casino floor. So how do we utilize our technology, innovation, our focus on electronic player interfaces to bring this new category in. I'm very excited to see what the industry's thought process is and how they embrace it.
Wow, wow, wow. Well, folks, for anyone out there who is viewing this now, I would just say to make sure you get your spot in early because the Interblock booth is always one of the more exclusive features of the floor. And if it is at all to the grand scale that you have said, then I'm sure it will be even more exclusive than usual. So, like I said, make sure you get in line early, maybe the day before. Um, so, I have one more question regarding the show. I understand you'll be speaking again this year on the topic of merging digital and physical gaming. For anyone interested, that will be in the Titian, I believe is how you say it, Titian 2303 Ballroom, Wednesday, October 9th from 11:40 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. So without giving away too many details about the presentation, because I want people to go see it, but just on the topic of merging the two sides, one thing that I was curious is like, how big of a topic is that for you in this stage of the industry, in the sense of like how much of your time is like being spent tackling this issue? Because I imagine that not only yourself, but basically everybody else in the supplier space has talked about this at length over the few years, and I feel like it's we all have things in our business that kind of consume a lot of our time and thoughts. But I'm curious how much of this particular idea kind of takes up your day to day.
It's something that, I mean, definitely on a weekly basis, I'm involved in several discussions. And like I said, we've over the past 12 months also made some acquisitions in this space to enable both Interblock and my relationship with Oak Tree Capital to be at the forefront of what we believe to be and what so far has proven to be a slow accelerating integration between the online space and traditional casinos. Um, and you can see that globally. I think after the presidential election this year, legislative initiatives across the United States in 2025 are going to focus very much on online gaming. It's like we see wagering, like we see in New Jersey and Michigan, Pennsylvania, expansion in that area, and the ability to bridge the online space in a number of ways, not just content, but the players themselves, the omni-channel discussion that we keep hearing more about. So I'm very interested in that, and I've always, as I spoke last year in a panel, I think it's critical that the traditional gaming space, as it's doing, take a very proactive approach and prepare itself for that omni-channel. We want to make sure that you know, the billions of dollars that have been spent across the United States in bricks and mortar and player databases and marketing and job creation, economic impact is utilized to drive the North American market, at least. I'll speak to that because it's G2E Las Vegas. Whereas if it was ICE, we'd talk more about Europe, I guess, or other venues around the world. And so as that proliferation continues, it's critical that casinos prepare themselves. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the players are going to leave the traditional casinos, go home, and they are going to be approached by online entities that will build a player database with them, a loyalty with them. And at some point, maybe the player comes one less visit a year or a month to a traditional bricks and mortar casino and will feel the impact. So I'm very proactive in supporting the traditional casino sector in technology and approaches to extend that player experience outside the traditional casino as they go home in a controlled, regulated environment with some unique offerings. And we'll continue to do so and continue to support the existing casino infrastructure and I would say relationships Interblock has formed and made Interblock so successful. So we'll talk more about that at the G2E show in Las Vegas this year.
Certainly, certainly, and I think one thing that I think about often is, as somebody who joined the industry less than 5 years ago, is Just interested in how, I think we're in a creative, I would say, I would categorize it as a creative time in the industry in the sense that kind of by necessity and just by pure, innovation that we are seeing crossover and melding and omni everything that we haven't seen, or at least the industry hasn't seen. Obviously, I'm a Reno kid. I'm a child of the land-based industry, so it is fascinating for me to see kind of the evolution of that, and like I said, the melding of all the different verticals and kind of how different companies are approaching that, especially in the ETGs, as in your guys' case. So I have one more for you, and thanks again for taking the time. I know it's a crazy time of year for you. Really great to have you on. One thing that we talk a lot about on the showcase series is cashless play. Every year, I talk to a lot of our partners in the cashless space, and that's kind of slowly making its way into the industry. Obviously, that's its own discussion, but if you kind of look at obviously casino floors today, coin-in slots are basically extinct for the most part. I mean, maybe there's might be a few venues here and there. Here in Reno, you might be able to find a couple in the corner or something like that. Um, but one feature of table gameplay specifically that is still very much reliant, obviously, is physical chips. So I want to get you out of here on this, but just what is Interblock's take on chipless play, and kind of how do you see that progressing in the future? Because that's something that very much interests me in kind of the evolution of table games.
I mean, as you know, at last year's G2E, our major innovative launch was the Smart Pit technology, one table game product of the year, almost, I think, globally. And as I've said in other interviews, the reaction of a lot of people initially was um, skepticism. And as I've said in the past, I'm sure there was skepticism when someone thought of removing coins from slots and introducing Tito, and here we are today. And so I believe very, very strongly, and the data is, which I'll share with you, is proving it out that utilizing chips in live table game products is something of the past. It will not be here much longer, in my opinion. When you look at the online space, there are no chips, and it's quite successful, and billions of dollars generated on a monthly basis with live streaming and remote gameplay. Players are very adapted to that, utilizing handheld devices or interfaces without chips. So we've just simply brought that to the casino floor, utilizing the Smart Pick technology. And since last year at G2E, and when you come to Las Vegas this year, you're going to see dozens of products up and down the strip and across the United States that do not use chips. They simply use PlayStations and player interfaces, which provides a different experience. Obviously, higher level of security, lower costs for casinos, which is critical right now from a labor perspective or collusion mistakes. So the in the initial product launch of that for Interblock was our live craps product. Aruze, which we acquired, also has the Roll to Win, both not utilizing chips from a traditional standpoint, right? They're utilizing an electronic format. And those products are some of the fastest growing products we have inside the company. They've resonated, obviously, with the live dice recognition, which was something people have been waiting for decades. We patented and we came out with. It's live in the United States on the Las Vegas Strip today. We're integrating that into the Roll to Win from Aruze as we speak. It'll be at G2E. So that's really proven out, I think, to a lot of operators that players are willing to play table games without chips. There are a tremendous amount of advantages to that type of technology, and the industry is heading that way. And as a result, we now have launched a roulette product. And just now going in next week at the Palazzo, there'll be a blackjack product. And you'll see several of those expansions or full pits when you come to G2E this year, which will be a craps, roulette, blackjack. We have baccarat. Integrated, no chips, and players playing with live dealers in a very, I would say, traditional format. However, without the physical chips themselves. So again, very proud of the team and the innovation of Interblock because I think we're on the forefront of table game innovation and technology, and really trying, again, to my previous statement, trying to keep traditional casinos competitive with the online space and to bridge that experience so that when an online player comes to a casino, it's not such a big transition for them to come to a smart pit, quite frankly. So bridging that gap with technology and content is something we're very focused on. And at this year's G2E, we intend to launch even more innovation to help accelerate that omni-channel discussion.
Well, certainly. And I'm sure myself and all of our viewers will be very excited to see. Again, that is booth number 1239. I'm sure you couldn't miss it if you were on the floor anyway, as it is always prominently featured again. John, thank you so much for joining me. I always feel like our discussions, I walk away a little bit smarter, a little bit better for it. ETGs have long been one of my favorite sectors of the industry. I think they're one of the more interesting things going on right now, and you guys are certainly at the forefront of that. So again, thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for the GGB Gaming Supplier Showcase, our exclusive look at the best products and services produced by vendors for the gaming, iGaming, and sports betting industries. For more information about the GGB Supplier Showcase, contact Terry Brady at tbrady@ggbmagazine.com.